Hello and welcome back to another episode of Paint by Minis. My name's Adam and this week we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to try and make some mini diorama bases. So why mini diorama bases? One thing I actually really enjoy doing with miniatures is actually basing. But unlike some of these models that I've been showing in the background here, not all miniatures have room for big bases, or may just be rank and file guys that you just don't have the time to commit really elaborate bases to. But there's also instances where we really want to do a nice base, but the miniature just doesn't allow us to. This could be something as simple as not having enough room on the base, or maybe the base will pull focus away from the miniature. One specific time that I ran into this was with this goblin miniature. It's really small and on a small base itself, so it's difficult to put anything elaborate around it. It's a shame as well because I really wanted to sell the idea that these goblins were in a horrible dark cave. So I thought, well, instead of putting the basing material on the actual miniature bases, maybe I'll make up a couple of standalone bases. So that's how I arrived at the idea of mini dioramas. As you can see, even though the goblin itself has quite minimal basing done to it, the fact that it's now standing next to a couple of stalagmites really goes a long way in showing that this model is in a cave. So following this same concept, we're going to go ahead and make up a couple of bases for our zombies that we made last week. So I don't really have much of a plan for these guys. All I know is I think I want to set the scene that they're in a cemetery or have just risen out of the ground. So in situations like this, the first step is just to have a look around my bit spots and see what bits I can pull out. So I decided on doing two bases, and I'm going to keep these 25mm so they fit in a bit nicer with the zombies. Apart from that, nothing real special. I dug out a couple of old skeleton models, I found a couple of skeleton sprues and some zombie sprues, and the rest is just my normal basing material. I've got some corks, I've got some Vallejo ground texture, some static grass and a couple of pots of glue. So now I knew what I was working with, I decided on one of the bases being a grave and the other being a coffin that's just been smashed open. For the coffin, most of my hard work was done for me. I mean, these skeleton models come with a couple of literal coffins as shields. For the grave, I had to get a little bit more creative, and I used what was, I believe, the backing of a chair for one of the Lord models on a mount. At the right angle and using the right tools, I reckon I could make this look like a pretty decent gravestone. So that was that, the bits are picked out, so I just got to it. Going in, I didn't really have much of a plan of anything. I think that's the fun with doing these bases, is that it's really so freeform. There's no rules to basing, so there's no making mistakes, you could literally do anything you wanted. This video isn't really intended to be a step-by-step type of guide, it's more just to give you ideas to go out and experiment with your own basing ideas. I'd really love to see anything you guys come up with. Right, let's get building. So whenever I'm doing basing and I have a central theme of the base, so with the grave and the open coffin, I just like to get those bits glued down first and then I can work around them. So that's all I'm really doing in this stage. And here's what the bases look like while I was just waiting for the glue to dry. So what I did next after this step was just start on the normal ground texturing. My plan for this was similar to normal bases, just add some Vallejo ground texture, and then seeing as though we're taking a bit extra time with these bases, I'm going to stick a few extra large rocks in, which I'm going to use by just pulling cork out. It makes some really convincing looking rocks. I'm also going to use some finer stones just to add a bit of variation between the actual ground itself. So that step went pretty smoothly, and here's the result while we're waiting for them to dry. So now, onto the painting. Again, I won't go into too much detail on the painting process as this is less of a how-to and more just trying to give you some inspiration, but I will go roughly over some of the steps. I started with just priming everything in black. Then for the mud, I just used the same steps in the last zombie video where I used a couple of shades of brown pigments. For the stones, it's just a case of dry brushing with a few shades of grey. The coffin I did in a very desaturated brown colour to try and contrast a bit against the brown mud. The zombie arm again got painted up in the same way as the last zombie video. And the skeleton I just dry brushed with some bone colours. Ignoring drying times, the whole painting was done in about 10 minutes. So I sealed the model with a matte varnish and left that to dry. I then went back over the mud with a little bit of water effects just to make it look like wet mud. This will match the rest of the zombies. So last but not least, I finished the model off with a couple of different static grasses. One is more of a standard dead grass, and the other is a moss-like texture that I placed around the gravestone and a few other areas. So, here's the finished product. I'm really pleased how these came out, and they really helped tie the zombies together. But more than that, I really enjoyed sharing with you this idea of adding some little scenic bases around your units to really spice them up. If you like this idea and do it yourself, I'd really love to see whatever you come up with. That's us done for another video, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.